Hello and welcome back to Inside Update, a show brought to you by InsideInvestigator.org. We're a nonprofit newsroom where we produce investigative journalism to root out corruption. It's incredibly rewarding work, and here to chat about her newest investigation into some really interesting stuff. Spoiler alert, this episode is going to be pretty heavy into health insurance, the health insurance debate. Alex Appel, how you doing today?
Good. I'm happy to be here, and sorry to you and to Joe and to our viewers for some Wi-Fi mishaps on my end, which is why this is starting a bit late.
No sweat. Hey, 15 minutes is going to make the difference. Then, our investigations are not deep enough, right? Like, I
Yeah.
love our content for that reason is that if you go to insideinvestigator.org, you're going to get something that has unfolded over a significant amount of time. And you're going to get a really serious look at it, not just, oh, here's the thing that's popular in the culture right now, which I think is a mark in our favor, frankly.
Yeah.
At least it keeps us away from some of the clickbait nonsense and I'll say it, yellow journalism that can get in the way of a lot of really good, important information making its way out to the public. Um, let's just frame up this episode really quick. I want to talk about your investigation. It's called Contractual Exclusion, Navigating Denial of Medically Necessary Treatment. We're going to talk a little bit about the government shutdown showdown and what that has to do with healthcare. And then we're also going to talk, if we have time, about why we didn't cover one of the largest corruption trials in recent history in the state of Connecticut. There's a very good reason for it, so hopefully we'll have time there. But let's start with Robert Romano. He's the subject of this newest investigation. Tell us what this guy's been going through.
Yeah, so Robert Romano is a licensed psychotherapist, and he also is a man who has sleep apnea. Um, and he had an insurance plan that had, well, just to wind back a bit, insurance plans, you might not know this when you sign a contract, but certainly didn't know this. They have a list of drugs that are approved and not approved. And they have a list of things that they treat and don't treat. And this goes beyond just like, okay, do you get vision and dental? This also can go into, in this case, weight loss. And
Mm.
so you can have, he unfortunately fell into this situation where he had a condition that his insurance does treat, sleep apnea, but the treatment he needed was classified as another issue that his insurance didn't treat, which is weight loss drugs. So at the end of last year, Zepbound, which is a GLP-1, that's a similar type of drug to Ozempic. Ask a doctor if that's true. They're both GLP-1s, but it was approved to treat sleep apnea. It's the only medication that does that. There are other methods of treating it, but this is the only drug that can treat sleep apnea in this country that's FDA approved. And so Romano had tried all of the traditional means of treating his sleep apnea, and that didn't work. So his doctor wanted him to try Zepbound. But the issue is his insurance wouldn't cover it because even though this is a dual purpose drug, it was strictly considered weight loss in his contract, and also it wasn't on the list of pre-approved drugs that he could get. And so you had this situation where no one was questioning the medical necessity of this drug. No one was.
I was just everyone agreed that it was medically necessary. Is it what
Everyone
you
agreed
think?
it could potentially be medically necessary. That
Okay.
was a slightly. There was another part of his case, which I didn't get into too much in the story because it was a little in the weeds, but it's mentioned a bit. They wanted him to jump through a bunch of hoops to even prove medical necessity, but they never said it wasn't medically necessary. They just said, okay, if you get XYZ extra test, maybe we'd reconsider it. Then he went to a center to get that test, and they said, we don't do that. Like, you don't, or we do that, but you don't need that. But the people who were reviewing his contract, no one claimed you don't need sleep apnea treatment. You do. if you have sleep apnea, if you snore a lot, please get treatment. That is a very serious health condition. No one was questioning that part because that was irrelevant to his contractual denial. It didn't matter. His condition didn't matter in this case. It was the contract that he signed. And when the state looked at it, it was a question of, every healthcare contract, every insurance contract that is offered in the state of Connecticut is pre-approved by the Connecticut Department of Insurance. So if it follows the contract and that contract follows the law, there's there's really not much wiggle room for negotiation. Now,
So
the insurance company could have offered him this drug, but they're not required to.
gotcha. So
Yeah.
I guess I have a two-part question for you. First, is this just a matter of, listen, if you're going to sign a contract, you should read the fine print and understand what you're signing? I guess, could you speak to that? And then the second part is, could you talk a little bit about the accountability process? Because really, this was, the investigation itself is about the navigation through not just the insurance company, but ostensibly there's supposed to be some recourse available through state government that reviewed and approved these contracts in the first place to say, hey, no, this is my case is new, novel, unique, or for the love of God, please just help me out, right? What
Yeah.
happens when you try to go down those roads? And it's not, I mean, I gather that Romano did not get what he wanted here and has not to this day.
No, unfortunately, he is not. He's paying for the treatment out of pocket, and it's not a cheap treatment. I think one thing to note about Romano is he's a healthcare professional. He has also a background in IT. So I didn't necessarily get into that too much, but like he's very well versed in kind of, scraping, understanding. It's easy to say, oh, well, you signed a contract, it is what it is. But like, unless you went to medical school or you have you spent, I don't know, your teenage years as like a social worker that I don't know about, Connor, like he's certainly more qualified to understand these contracts than you and I are, and most
Yeah.
people. So I'm hesitant to phrase it as you signed it, you have to know, because most people really don't know. And a lot of the times these contracts are updated when new drugs, new treatments, new regulations are available. Also, he got this through Access Health CT. Sometimes those contracts change. I don't know if this particular one did, but you can be on a contract for years and it's like, oh gosh, I remember it was once at 7-Eleven, and for some reason or another, I was asked to maybe it was because it was during COVID. I don't know. For some reason or another, I was asked to sign something. Maybe it was for a discount, but it was like I had this small screen in front of me and it was like the terms and conditions. And I like to consider myself someone who I'm never going to read that. I used to try to, and then I realized I didn't understand any of it. So it's kind of useless anyway. If
Yeah.
you need insurance, you need insurance. And if you can only afford X, Y, or Z, or if this is the plan that works for you, this is kind of what you have. That's not, I mean, he switched insurance in the end, or he's in the process of it. So it's not like he doesn't have other options, but like, this isn't an intuitive thing. And this isn't something most people would know. There's one thing I forgot to mention in the summary of the article, and that is that he also believes that Anthem Insurance, the company he is insured through, did not follow its own procedures regarding timelines in responding to him. So now to the second point, what do you do? Well, Connecticut does have an insurance review board. That's probably not its exact title. Read the article to find out. But if you have any sort of insurance claim, not just health insurance, auto insurance, house insurance, whatever, and you think you've been shortchanged or an insurance company has done something wrong, you have a means of having a state external authority review that. And then for health insurance claims specifically, they usually only review two things. Like, one, did they determine something wasn't medically necessary when it was? Or two, did they break the contract?
Gotcha.
And yeah, it's not the most straightforward process. And sometimes you're just in a situation like this guy is where medical necessity is irrelevant. Did it break the contract? Now he suspects that there were some issues going on with his external review. He suspects that people didn't fully read his case. I was not able to talk to people on the review board who looked over his case. So Romano is alleging wrongdoing, but even that, there's not a lot to be done. I don't want to say that these review boards lack an additional authority, because they are the additional authority to people that come before them. But he thinks there's something wrong, and so it's also not really straightforward how you file a complaint.
Okay. You answered this partially, but I know last time you were on the show, we talked about making sure that we're talking about how this investigation or any investigation ties back to our mission to root out corruption. And you spoke to this. It's, there's a complexity barrier. There's maybe even an argument for, predatory, contract making and some issues in there. But could you talk a little bit about, other elements of corruption that you saw that drew you to this and that came out in the course of writing the investigation? And I think this applies to the next topic we're going to talk about as well. So start with just this investigation, then we'll kind of get into the, broader landscape that you've also, you've written about.
Yeah. So in terms of corruption, like every month, Romano is paying $500 to $600 for his medication. That's not a trivial amount of money. Every month that this process is delayed, he's paying that. And so I'm treading carefully because I just wasn't able to speak to the other party on record. And I'm not a lawyer. I don't work in insurance. I'm not a medical professional, so I don't want to say something inaccurate. But every single, first off, this is something that really impacts him. And this is something that, it causes financial harm. But in terms of corruption, if there is something wrong, how do you, if the review board does something you believe is wrong, what can you do to make it right? So he was in contact with the assistant attorney general in the state who, was trying to get he's trying to get people to review the case. And he's just not hearing back from people, or he's hearing things and it doesn't make sense to him. People are saying things that people are allegedly, I should say. I haven't listened to these conversations. They were not recorded. They were not, or if they were, they weren't shared with me. I don't know. But people are allegedly saying things that make it seem like they didn't read his case file. And so it's almost like, beating your head against the wall. That's the sense I got, where there's also just this fundamental disconnect where he has two complaints. One, that his insurance company, or maybe three complaints, I should say. One, the insurance company isn't upholding its end of the contract because they are claiming to deny Zepbound because it's a weight loss drug and he doesn't need it for weight loss treatment. Two, the insurance company is not following their own end of the contract because they did not follow their deadlines for his internal reviews and his appeals. And then three, that the state is not thoroughly reviewing the casework, and he believes that the state not reviewing it contributes to his external review being rejected. Or at least he doesn't trust it because he had this conversation with a state official and he walked away, thinking, oh, well, this person, you have a window for all of these appeals. Like, this person got the window wrong. That means that they didn't read my case. So what do you do? So I think that kind of covers it, where it's like you reach an end point in a process. And once you're at that end, if something went wrong, what do you do? If you think something went wrong and you're not hearing from anyone, how do you know?
Yeah, you're kind of stuck at a dead end.
Yeah. And is it just you, I mean, in the meantime, he's paying $600 a month, Right.
Yeah. So, all right. Under the heading of corruption, alleged fraud and contract adherence, complexity, inefficiency, poor service, people not doing their job. Anyways, let's talk about the federal government. Let's go talking about some of the issues that you've been writing about. And talk a little bit about this government shutdown showdown. Talk a little bit about the underlying issue here, like, 30 seconds tops here, just kind of what's going on. If you could just summarize the national discourse in 30 seconds, that would be wonderful. And then we can just kind of talk about, the Connecticut corruption focus specifically here.
So it all started in 1776.
Yes.
So we're in the middle of a government shutdown. The way to end that is, well, there's two ways. One is just not going to happen anytime soon. Congress needs to approve on a budget. The other, which is much more likely, is Congress needs to pass something called a continuing resolution. Now, the Democrats are preventing that. They have a non-negotiable, which the Republicans are not. It's a very big non-negotiable, and that non-negotiable is the Affordable Care Act had some enhanced premium tax credits that extended both the number of people who could use it and the types of coverage its users had. Those tax credits were introduced during COVID to stabilize healthcare markets, and they're set to expire at the end of the year. The Democrats want to renew that, and they won't vote on a continuing resolution, or at least certainly Blumenthal, who has had multiple press conferences, has said, like, this is the red line. So they won't vote on that. They want to extend those tax credits about 10 years. So we're talking about $350 billion.
Okay.
And in Connecticut, that immediately would impact 28,000 people who are on the Affordable Care Act in terms of them losing their insurance, but also 90% of people who get healthcare through Access Care or Access Health use those subsidies in some way. But it's actually not clear if their premiums will increase much, or if the repealing of these enhanced premium tax credits will make a difference. I say repealing, that's the wrong word. Expiration.
Allowing them to expire, right?
Yeah, allowing them to expire. No one's repealing them. This was just the date that was chosen. And this is a non-negotiable for Democrats, except for, I think, 3 voted to pass a continuing resolution. Not Murphy, not Blumenthal. But that's a huge ask,
Yeah.
It just is.
It does seem like the Connecticut delegation, too, is playing a outsized role in this as well. I mean, I don't think that's just a feature of us seeing Connecticut news on a regular basis. I think that these are, folks who have been around a while, have the ability to throw their weight around and have that outsized influence. I think some people would obviously say that's great. That's what we want in, a smaller state legislators, to be able to throw their weight around. But it also seems like, I don't know, that's a double-edged sword at the same time. And, our mission is to, root out corruption. We do that on a state level. We aren't here to tackle the entirety of the national issue, but you've done some really solid reporting on the various ways that, there are very real state impacts on both sides of this. You made some great points when we were talking about this before the show. I mean, I don't know if you want to frame this up a little bit, just kind of in terms of what you're seeing and, working in some of your coverage as well. Like, take the floor here for another couple minutes here and kind of lay out what you're seeing and, how it relates to our mission to root out corruption as well.
Yeah. So, it is nice to, especially some of our senators may or may not have some very big long-term ambitions. Rumors I should not even mention, but, Connecticut's just not going to be impacted by the expiration from these enhanced premium tax credits as much as other states. We're just not. The 28,000 people who will not be able to be insured through Access Health, they make 400% of the federal poverty level, which is almost $72,000 a year. I think that's per individual. And then the median income in Connecticut is around 46,000. So, 72,000 is not like, rolling in dough, especially with the cost, depending on where you live, rent, so on. So I'm not going to say like these people are, but we're talking about 28,000 people There's some other provisions in the big beautiful bill that have other impacts on healthcare, but they're more open to negotiate. But then, as the government shuts down, or if the shutdown continues, starting November 1st, no more SNAP benefits being distributed, no more payments for federal employees. I believe Connecticut has, I'm not even gonna say that number, but we have a few thousand federal employees, non-military personnel, who won't be getting their paychecks. It's going to impact flights. It's going to impact. As a reporter, I can tell you right now, I've been reaching out to some people, and they've been deferring me to federal departments that are not, like, their spokespeople are not working right now, or if they are, they're focused on other things. And then the other thing about SNAP benefits specifically is we have about like 366,000 people in the state who use SNAP benefits, and Lamont just allocated $3 million for food share to make sure that those people have maybe more resources when SNAP's not there. But you're talking about this trade-off between 360,000 people versus 28,000 people. And I don't want to say one group's more important than the other. I'm not saying one benefit's more important than the other. But when if you compare us to, like, I think Texas or even other states in the Northeast, it's not going to impact us that much. Healthcare premiums through Access Health are probably going to increase even if the subsidies are extended. And if they don't, there's this one, I'm forgetting who did the study, but there is an article on our website. I think it said if these tax credits are repealed, premium, like, healthcare and payment isn't even going to rise by more than 1% or more than 2%. So it's really not. If you're trying to look at this from a Connecticut perspective, you have to ask, like, what trade-offs are being made for a national issue.
Right.
Sorry, I feel like I was rambling. I'm trying to be
no.
I
want
to inject my opinions.
Thing, and obviously, I tongue-in-cheek ask you to describe a complex healthcare situation in 30 seconds, and I recognize that that's an impossibility. But I think you touched on a few things. One is there's absolutely political ambitions and jockeying going on. I know, like, we don't have to get into specifics, but maybe that's just a perennial truth that is occurring with politicians in DC. But I also think that it's important when we talk about corruption to recognize that sometimes we get stuck in these, and I think media generally has this problem where it's, oh well, where it's X group against Y group, and these are the only two trade-offs, and it seems like a false dichotomy, in my opinion, when we start talking about definitions of corruption and what we're actually looking at. Because when you talk about the needs of one constituency over another, it's very easy to start doing math, but I would describe this as, to steal a phrase, striking at the branch rather than the root. And if it's going to be about one constituency versus another, yeah, it's going to be a moving line for politicians, for political expediency. It's not going to lead to an anti-corrupt future. It's going to result in whoever has more political capital in the moment and who's willing to make a compromise. So, like, in my opinion, when I look at corruption and evaluating whether or not something is corrupt, it's, hey, is this initiating violence? Is this diminishing wealth by force or fraud? Is this violating consent? And in this case, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what a lot of these programs are founded on in the first place. So, you're kind of already downstream of the root. And if we're just going to talk about the branches, is that really going to solve the problem? We've been doing this for a very long time as a country. I'll throw that out there as kind of a floofy phrase, but to continue this hacking at branches, it doesn't seem to be getting very far. And as an organization and as a team that's focused on rooting out corruption, I get excited about the opportunity to strike at the root and to talk about that. And I think that, your investigation does this. A lot of our investigations do this, but we want to draw your attention to the most important things that are out there. And if we're not doing that, we're not doing our jobs. And it can't be all this tangential stuff. It has to be the focused, narrow piece that, again, we started this episode talking about the dangers of a poor media diet that's out there. We want to be the solution to that to a great extent. And I think our team truly believes that, which is fantastic.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is, I think one thing I really like about us, not to toot our own horn, is we really also focus on things or angles of stuff that isn't reported. So there are some, there are some issues that everyone's talking about, and we get a different angle. Everyone's talking about healthcare now. I don't think most people speak about contractual exclusions, or at least I haven't seen that in Connecticut. But, I think we really fill in those gaps really well in Connecticut.
I believe that. And, I could sit here and take zero credit, truly. I mean, just because our reporters go out there. I think I've mentioned it on this program before, but it bears repeating. I don't sit here and say, all right, Alex, it's you're going after the contractual exclusion piece. I want you to write about what you care about, what you're passionate about, what you find interesting. And part of the philosophy of our newsroom is that if you're having fun, if you're genuinely passionate about something, your writing is going to be better. The quality of the product is going to be better. We just got a comment here through someone who's watching on YouTube saying, thank you for your reporting on what isn't being talked about by other news outlets in detail in Connecticut. Please keep doing this great work, no matter who is involved. And as we look to wrap up this episode, I can absolutely promise you that no matter who is involved, we're going to be like rabid dogs going after corruption here. It's really, in a highly ethical, responsible, measured, intelligent journalist kind of way. But our folks genuinely care, and that's a difference maker, right? I mean, we're not burning people out just for the sake of getting clicks. We don't run ads. We don't have paywalls. We do these things to make sure that our product is the absolute best it can be. And that allows the journalism to not only just be the focus, the news to be the focus, right? You don't need the clickbait. You don't need the yellow journalism. You don't need the nonsense. If we can put a plate of media in front of you that is, wholesome, part of this complete breakfast, then, that's kind of who we want to be. And I'll close out with a thank you to you, Alex. Thank you to everyone who watches, listens, tunes in, donates to support our nonprofit. But also just to put out a call for feedback. I think one of the things that sets our business apart as well is we are constantly on the lookout for ways that we can be better. And in fact, when someone submits a correction that results in a change, or when someone says, hey, here's a great idea about how your newsroom could be better, more often than not, I'm mailing them a t-shirt or a mug to say thank you, instead of, getting upset that we got caught with a mistake, or, oh man, why didn't we think of this? We're building a team here and a culture of ending corruption. And I'm so thankful for the, hundreds, truly thousands. We reached 2.1 million people last month. It's a big group of people who are out there making a difference, taking an interest in our work and truly caring. And, that's something that we have to keep in mind, right? We're not writing for one person, 10 people, 100 people. Getting rid of corruption improves human lives for everyone. And that's a really cool place to be. Alex, huge thank you. Folks, head over to insideinvestigator.org. Her investigation, it's got some really cool, bright, neon-y designs for the visual design that Joe did. It's right on the homepage. Again, insideinvestigator.org. Check it out. Read the investigation. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And until then, be well, stay safe, and stay informed.